So, I would like nothing more than be able to sit here at this table with a nice cup of coffee and tell y'all that I really enjoyed Neil Marshall's Hellboy and thought it was great. But I can't because it's fucking terrible. And it really pains me to say that because I like so many of the people involved, principally Neil Marshall and David Harbour. So, I think first up we need to address the fact that the reason this movie is bad is not because it's not Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy 3. It's bad for many, many other unrelated reasons. So it's come out. There's a lot of allegations that have come out from insider reports, which of course have not been verified and have been denied by Lloyd Levin, one of the producers' lawyers, that Lawrence Gordon and Lloyd Levin, two of the 16 producers on this film, 16 producers for a $50 million film. Basically, they kind of spent most of the production wresting control away from Neil Marshall. His usual cinematographer was fired halfway through filming, amongst other things. And although those allegations have been denied, as I say, by Levin's lawyer, this is definitely a film that suffered from producer interference. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. First off, the script is bad. The structure is all over the place. The effects are patchy, to say the least. The post-production is just awful. Shoddy. Not the kind of thing that you would want to release in a cinema. So this version of Hellboy is a fresh reboot. Completely disconnected from the Guillermo del Toro version. We've got Hellboy being tasked to stop the resurrection of Nimue the Blood Queen, an ancient Arthurian witch who has been split into pieces and buried on the different parts of Britain. So it takes place mostly in Britain, which would be great if a bunch of the cast weren't Americans doing fake British accents. Most notably, Daniel Day Kim and Sasha Lane as Ben Damio and Alice Monaghan, respectively. Both Americans doing really dodgy British accents. And it's a shame because, accents aside, the performances are alright. David Harbour as Hellboy I actually really like, although it does seem, from scene to scene, that he's struggling to a greater or lesser degree with the prosthetics, although sometimes he nails it. It's very dependent on the scene in question. Also, a lot of this has been dubbed. Probably like 80% of the film has been ADR'd. And badly. Some of it just from a mixing standpoint, in that from one sentence to the next, the characters' voices don't sound like they're coming from the same room. To the awkward editing of it, where you'll get people's dialogue continue on after they've turned away from the camera or when they're not even on the screen. It's Ian McShane is in this movie, and no amount of Ian McShane that he smothers all over the film. And Ian McShane is great. He's just so naturally charming. Even some of his stuff falls flat due to in the way it's framed, a lot of it. There's some interesting creature design in this movie that is hampered by poor CGI and bad compositing. There is there's a really cool soundtrack that's used in a Guardians of the Galaxy-esque way, but ends up coming off more Suicide Squad. It's so out of place and poorly implemented. This is a film whose ambition far outstrips its reach. It is trying for something that $50 million can't do. And I've said before that I'm okay with the movie looking cheap, because otherwise we wouldn't be getting a Hellboy movie. But you can do good and cheap. Neil Marshall can do good and cheap. He's done some of the most beloved episodes of Game of Thrones. The Blackwater episode from season 2. Great battle sequences that, were done on a shoestring budget, a TV budget, But this is just a mess. It's a bunch of action scenes with varying levels of effects competency and engagement, strung together by really leaden dialogue. Some of the dialogue in this movie is really awful. There's a couple of moments where it sings. Some character stuff early on, really. It kind of disappears as it goes through the film, as it the film tries to get to where it's going. Some of that really suffers. Some of it shines early on, but yeah, it really suffers as it goes on from basically the movie just trying to get the plot done. Because there's too much going on. They bring in so many elements and ideas and characters and concepts from the comics that Del Toro didn't get to, or didn't use at all. I don't know why I've got scissors. Didn't use at all. But they don't use them in a way that is interesting or, again, well executed. They just put them in there so you can go, that's the thing from the comics. And a lot of it is also sequel baiting. It's just so much. It's just too much for what this is. And they're just trying to throw everything at the wall. And it just makes it a mess. None of it matters. It's done so quickly and with so little import that you just kind of skip over the meaning of it all. There isn't any stakes or emotion behind it. I'm so disappointed that it's turned out as bad as it is, because I like Neil Marshall as a director and I really like David Harbour as a star. And I think he's great casting for Hellboy. And I think he does a mostly good job here, but he's just hampered by the fact that the production is such a mess. It's shockingly shoddy. And what little fun there is to be had here is so heavily overshadowed by the poor nature of the production, the terrible script, poor editing, bad effects. There's like maybe 2 good scenes in this whole film. Maybe. And it could have been so much better. But they just tried to cram too much into it. They cram so much into it that most of the dialogue is spent explaining what's happening rather than letting you sort of see it through. What's actually taking place on screen is so much tell and not enough show. And when they do show you stuff, they then tell you about it again. There are like 3 or 4 flashback sequences in this that are then later explained by characters. It's just and those, at least 2 of those don't actually have any bearing on the plot. It's just a mess. Things just happen that bear no relation to anything else that's going on in the film. And then they never mattered in the first place. You could cut them. Apart from, the fact that it's maybe a cool action sequence, but it's a cool action sequence that's underscored by a rock song which just feels out of place and is badly mixed into the audio, so it's overbearing. Oh, it's such a mess. And I really wish it was good, and I really wish we could be, talking about a resurgence in Hellboy as a franchise, because this movie sets up a bunch of stuff for sequels. And I don't think it's going to get one, because it is very, very bad, and I think word of mouth will kill it. It's not projected for a great opening weekend, and I think the reviews have already been awful. Once that gets around, this movie's going to die a death, and it's a shame. It's a real shame, because, again, I like a lot of the people involved. But what are you going to do? We won't be getting to it on the next podcast, just because of Chris's schedule. We had to pre-record one, but we should manage to fit a Hellboy-centric episode in before Avengers Endgame comes out, in which we will talk about this movie. And, of course, if you have any thoughts about it, don't forget to get in touch at BigDamnCast on Twitter, bigdamncontact@gmail.com. When that episode rolls around, we'll, of course, also be digging into the new Star Wars stuff that's since been revealed. And, yeah, so Hellboy. It's real bad. And that makes me sad. It's bad, and I'm sad. I'm sad because it's bad. Oh, I suppose the next one of these will be Avengers Endgame, so hopefully that'll be a bit more positive. Catch you on the podcast, guys and girls. And others.